Susan Gilbert. She's a Genius Network member. She joined this year. She's beloved in the group. She's a best-selling author, business visionary, and founder of Messengers on a Mission, who is here to help you write and publish the book you'll be remembered for. So using a transformative process that goes beyond interviews, she helps entrepreneurs like yourselves dig below the surface to uncover your golden idea, your unique genius code, to uncover the most emotionally compelling idea that will express your true voice and create a legacy that lives on forever. So she's been an entrepreneur since 1987. She has evolved years of traditional business experience into several cutting-edge projects, which include a 5-location coffee cafe chain in San Diego, California, which led to becoming a co-author of The Complete Idiot's Guide to Starting and Running a Coffee Bar. Over the last 15 years, she has helped hundreds of people, including an exclusive group of high-level entrepreneurs, leading psychologists, and business leaders to turn their unique message into a published book. Author of 6 books, a top 100 marketing influencer, along with Seth Godin and Gary Vee. Her work has been featured in USA Today, CNBC, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and more. Her flagship gift book, The Land of I Can, became a magnet for opportunity after it was first self-published in 2001, when that industry was in its infancy. So your book is a gift that can make a real difference. Don't let it stay inside of you. So share your unique message with the world is what Susan shares with us. So please help me in welcoming Dean Jackson and Susan Gilbert.
You know, when you get an introduction like that, you think, who is that person? I think I want to listen to that person.
That's so great. Well, I've been really looking forward to this, Susan, to get to spend some time with you. So
I've never met you in person, but you've been in my world for many, many years, and I have much thanks for you for the 9-word email.
Oh boy,
talk about gold. That is real gold.
That's been a great one. Well, talk about like magic, powerful word pairs. That being a messenger on a mission sounds like a pretty good calling right there.
Thank you.
Tell me about that. How did that come about? Because that's a grabber, right there. You say that, a messenger on a mission.
Yeah, thank you so much. Gosh, where to begin? This is quite a story. And I think if it's okay, I'm going to take about 5 minutes and really take you back to the beginning rather than jumping in right where Messengers on a Mission became a domain name 5 or 6 years ago, because it's been in my world probably my whole life. Like when Timothy was talking about, I've been an entrepreneur since 1987. We have people on this call that weren't even born yet in 1987. So, I've been around for a while. I turned 71 next month.
Wow, shut up.
So
that's possible.
So as a child, I was the firstborn, was the only child for 6 years, but I was one of those kids that lived in a book. I was like underneath my mom's sewing machine or crawling up on the shelf of the cedar closet. And, all kids have their imaginary friends. My imaginary friends came from books. And that continued for years and years and years as a teenager. Other kids are out playing. I'm in my room reading my books. When I was in 10th grade, I had enough credits to graduate from high school because I was always reading books and taking classes. So that's just part of my DNA and who I am. So there's no surprise that when I was in 10th grade and my guidance counselor called me in and said, Susan, we want to talk about what you're going to do and what college you're going to go to. And I was like, oh, I'm not going to go to college. My dad works in the steel mill. We it's not going to happen. And he pulled out paperwork and he said, oh no, you'll get a scholarship. Take these papers home to your family. You can get a scholarship. So I did. Waited till my dad came home from the mill. We all sat down at the dining room table and I pulled out my papers all excited. And he said, Susan, put those papers away. Girls don't go to college. Girls just grow up and get married.
Oh my goodness.
So I did.
Mm.
I married my first sweetheart.
What year
He
was this?
returned
I want
from
to get a sense of the timing of this. So that would have been when?
you're not gonna be 1968.
Okay. I was born
He
in that.
returned from Vietnam,
Okay. Yeah.
alive. We're happy.
Yeah.
We get married. And we had a plan.
Mm.
Plans, I'm going to come back. That's going to be an open loop for some other things I'll
Okay.
share. But we had a plan. He knew how important it was that I was going to go to college.
Mm.
So the plan was he would get his education done first, working full time, but going to college. And then it would be my turn.
Mm.
And then we would start a family because we got married so young.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? When he was 28 and I was 25, he was diagnosed with acute myelogenous leukemia, which we now know was caused by Agent Orange. That term wasn't even, talk about bullish in terms, that term wasn't even in our vocabulary at that point. And they gave him 6 weeks to live. He lived longer than that, not by much. And during that time frame, my mother was diagnosed with cancer of the colon. And from the time the first diagnosis took place to the last death, because both my mother and my husband passed away, 9 months had taken place.
Oh my goodness.
My life was upended. And guess what? My husband was 3 credits away from graduating from college.
Oh.
So I'm right back to square one
Mm-hmm.
again. Can't make enough money in small town Pennsylvania as I was doing payroll to afford college, even though I went to Penn State Extension for one course on creative writing, and couldn't pay for college. So I heard that if you go to California and you establish residency, within 6 months, you can go to a state college.
Oh, wow.
So I did that. What did I have to lose?
Wow, that was
right?
all for free. You could go to a state college?
Yes. So
Okay.
I moved from small town Pennsylvania,
Right.
went back to my maiden name, which is Gilbert. It's a lot easier than my married name, which was Grotenthaler.
Oh my goodness.
And started like wipe the slate clean.
Yeah.
I figured I'd tell my story when it was appropriate. And while I was establishing that residency, an opportunity, which you'll get a kick out of this one, Dean, an opportunity fell into my lap, but I don't think it was, I believe in divine guidance, which we'll get into.
Placed into your lap. Yeah.
But it fell into my lap, and guess what it was?
Tell me.
Selling microcomputers.
Oh my
The
goodness.
TRS-80s, 8-inch floppy drives. Nobody
Wow.
knew what computers were. Very many, like
Right.
if you were a real geek, you might like Steve Jobs or,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
remember
maybe
those. That must have been like the in the 80s, right?
it
Then.
was
Yeah.
1979.
Yeah.
1979.
That was what we had in our computer lab. in
Yes,
school,
yes.
right?
So I was perfectly positioned when the IBM PC came out
Mhm.
to be able to sell those. I understood. And I'm not, I mean, I had no computer science background. I'm not a techie at all,
Right.
but I love that instead of a typewriter with whiteout, you know, and those little things, like I could sit down and use it like a word processor.
Yeah.
Or I could do what if statements like the VisiCalc, like the Excel spreadsheets, the original ones. So long story short, I did that. I ended up creating a really phenomenal career for myself, both monetarily, and built this outside sales department for 6 computer lands in the area. All coming from a place of willing to take a risk and willing to see what opportunities were out there. And I've lived my life as an adventure.
Mhm.
But from that, then AT&T recruited me. I thought I'd died and gone to heaven because I never got that college education. And now AT&T wants me at an executive level.
Mm.
And the guys I was working for at Computerland said, Susan, they were all ex-NCR guys. They said, Susan, you are not going to be happy at AT&T. You're an entrepreneur. So it's probably not going to work out. We understand why you're going to do it, but you always have a job with us. You can always come back.
Yes.
And it didn't work out, but I couldn't go backwards.
Mm.
I was running marathons at the time to run off stress. And I thought, what I wouldn't give for a good bran muffin at this business meeting and a good cup of coffee, not this watered down whatever is coming out of the machine. So I started Little Miss Muffins.
Oh my
Never
goodness.
worked in a restaurant. Again, didn't know what I was doing, but could see the opportunity with the very health-oriented people that were in San Diego. Mrs. Fields cookies were big at the
Yes.
time. So I
Right.
was like the knockoff to Mrs. Fields cookies.
Right.
And about this point, when that one
Part of San
location,
Diego were you
it was in downtown.
oh, downtown.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And
Right.
I was then selling as breakfast meeting platters,
Mhm.
muffins to the same companies that I had sold hundreds of thousands of dollars of computer equipment to.
Right. Yeah.
So I was well known. I was known as a successful businesswoman. And it was about this point, which is again an open loop. We're going to circle back to the beginning, where people would say, Susan, how did you do all this?
Right.
You should write a book.
Mm.
And I'm thinking, mid-90s, who wants to read a book by Susan Gilbert? It was before self-publishing. It was when books were done by celebrities or,
Mhm.
politicians. But I hired a writing coach
Mhm.
and I started writing, and I wrote my autobiography. It was
Mhm.
never published. Didn't like it. Rewrote it as a fiction book in the first person with conversation.
Yes.
Didn't like it. Didn't do anything with it. And then I went to the Awakened World Conference in Palm Springs in 1999. If anyone here knows who Dr. Michael Beckwith is, and
Mm.
Gene Houston and
Mm.
Barbara Marx Hubbard, you can imagine it's
Yeah.
a pretty small group, less than 100 people, the energy that was in that room. And when I drove back to San Diego from Palm Springs, I had these words bouncing around inside my head. Got home, wrote them down, and it became, that's a bigger story another time, but that became The Land of I Can.
Mm. An
Because I
adventure.
looked up on my bookshelf and I saw all the books that I treasured,
Yes.
books that were hundreds of years old.
Yes.
And I thought, this is a message that will live long beyond me.
Mhm.
And so I made it with a hardback, cloth covered, embossed dust jacket, something that was a gift that people would give to other people and they would treasure.
Mhm.
And you know what happened, Dean, and everybody else that's listening, because this is really the point of the story, is that I had a hard time calling myself an author.
Mm.
Even though I was doing book signings and readings at Barnes and Noble and the different bookstores that were prevalent at that time,
Mhm.
because I thought that message just dropped in.
Mhm.
So I put a little sticky pad up on my computer screen. It said, I received a message. I'm willing to deliver this message. I'm willing to be a messenger to the message.
Mm.
Now, it took how many years before it became apparent to me, because other people would come to me and say, how did you do that? How did you have this huge success, which I did with the book? It was #1 on Amazon overall, Dean. Of course, this
That's
is when
amazing.
Amazon,
That was The
um,
Land of I Can.
The Land of I Can was #1. And it was because some really big names got behind me. Neil Donald Walsh of Conversations with God, Robert Allen, No Money Down, Mark Victor Hansen. They loved the message. They loved the energy that I had to get the message
Yeah.
out. They got behind me. And then people wanted to know how I did that. So I started working online, which is how I met so many people from the Genius Network,
Mhm.
how I met Joe many years ago at an
Mhm.
internet marketing conference. And then there came a point where my shift went from marketing online, although that never went away,
Mhm.
to me really helping the people who have that message inside themselves
Mhm.
that they want to get out in a really big way. And many of the people are highly successful in one industry,
Yes.
and yet it's like they climbed that mountain, but it's not the right mountain anymore. And it isn't that the mountain changed, it's that they've changed. And
Mhm.
now they have a bigger cause. They have a better
A bigger
idea of what,
reach. A bigger reach.
a bigger
For
reach.
sure. When you look at this, I think that the first time I think I heard your name, or when I remember back then, this was a real, phenomenon, what was going on.
Yeah.
And around that time, like you were saying, there wasn't really this whole self-publishing and publishing online and ebooks especially was such a thing. And I had written a book called Stop Your Divorce back in 1999 and 1998 with a gentleman, Homer McDonald, who had spent 45 years, his whole life, doing nothing but saving marriages in San Antonio, Texas.
Wow.
And we wrote that book, and it became a phenomenon online. It was an amazing thing. It was one of the first sort of books about something other than how to make money selling books online, right? Like your book was exactly in that same thing, helping people.
Yes.
Right? But so many people, you think about, like Homer had all that knowledge inside of him, limited to the people who happen to live in Bexar County, Texas, who may have come through one of his clinics. But when we were able to package and publish all of that knowledge, that message of how to stop your divorce, we were able to help, tens of thousands of people all over the world with that message. Yeah.
Yes.
And so many of these things, I had no experience or anything to do with marriage. I wasn't even married at the time, but I was a marketer, and I knew that was a message that could be very helpful in the world.
Life-changing.
And it's funny how you feel, like I found him in USA Today. I was reading through USA Today, and I saw he had a little classified ad that he was doing telephone counseling. And then in one other section of the thing, he had a section where he was offering, he was calling it franchise. Well, the first day that he had run an ad offering to teach people his model of saving marriages as a business type of thing. And I just called him and started helping him with the marketing things. But isn't it amazing? You talk about like getting things landing in your lap.
Yes, but we have to be open to it.
That's what I was
Like
just
you
gonna
were
say.
open to it.
Absolutely. That's the whole thing.
Yeah. So yeah, while some people, I wrote an ebook on Clout, Klout, which I know you know what that is, but it was a social media, which I really thought it was excellent because it didn't measure how many followers or fans you had, but it was what level of engagement you had. And it doesn't exist anymore, but way back then it was big for me because I had such a high Clout score, but it was because I was right there when Facebook came out, and I was right there when Twitter came out, and we were using it just to get websites indexed for SEO. So it's kind of like we're all a part of all the things that we have been and lived and learned in our lives. And what happened with The Land of I Can is that here I'm thinking it's a gift book that women will buy for themselves and they'll give to other women. And that did happen. But somebody gave a copy of it to a woman by the name of Elaine Fink. She was the executive director for the Leadership Academy that was overseeing all the principals, leading the principals of the 250 schools in San Diego. And she had a big move and change that she was going to initiate that particular year. So she bought 250 copies of the book to gift to each principal at their first in-house conference. The principals took those books back into the schools, and the schools every year would order 20, 30, 40 more books, 20, 30, 40 more books, until I asked them, I said, what are you doing with these books? And they said, oh, we use it for character development in the elementary schools.
Oh, wow.
Dean, I could have died
That's so amazing.
at that point, and I would have left my mark in the world.
Yeah.
And that's another piece of this puzzle about being a messenger on a mission, because I believe that messengers, like there's a calling that we get. You heard the calling when you looked at that ad, and you were like, this, I need to help this person. You got the calling.
Yeah.
Once we get the calling as a messenger, we can accept the calling, which you did. And then we take that calling out into the world, which is what you did for this particular man. So messengers can get the calling and not do anything with it.
Right.
Or they can get the calling and say, okay, I accept it, but
Yeah.
you know, not really take it out to the masses, because
Yeah.
that's really what we want to do. We want to help as many people. We want to serve as many
Mhm.
people as we can in the world. And when I think about what you were mentioning, how things have changed. When I had my muffin shops, I could only reach the number of people that could come into my shop.
Right.
And when I started to go to work online, I'm like, I can help anybody anywhere in the world. There are no boundaries
That's it.
anymore.
We've been calling that lovingly, we've been calling this little land that we're all migrating to Cloudlandia.
Yes,
Because that's where
absolutely.
we're
I
all
love
living
that.
in Cloudlandia now. And
Yes.
everybody, I mean, you look at this, what I always love is looking at this. Sometimes if I go into gallery mode here, you can see all these people from all over. I mean, you know, we're here wherever we are, but we've usually will have people, Susan, we'll have somebody in Hawaii who's there in the morning. We'll have somebody in Liechtenstein, all the way on the other side, you know, of Europe there, that, and everywhere in between. We got the Netherlands, we've got, but in Cloudlandia, we're all everywhere all at once.
Yes.
We're all everywhere all at once. And you can, everybody's got a one-to-one connection to everybody. And there's nobody stopping you from reaching anybody. I mean, it's just such an amazing thing. Even 20 years ago, we couldn't have dreamed that this was possible, Susan.
Not at
I
all.
mean, not,
Not
you
at
know,
all. I mean, I just thought if you had a website, super cool. You know, who knew that that was
absolutely.
like just the tip of the iceberg?
So how long was it then? And I, the same thing, when I did Stop Your Divorce, it became very successful. People were watching what was happening. How long was it from there till you were being drawn into, please tell us what you did, show us how to do what you
Yes.
did there?
Yeah, the book was published in the year 2000, The Land of I Can. We all know what happened shortly thereafter with September 11th.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly, one of the chapters, the last, where there's the land of apathy, the
Mm-hmm.
land of fear, the land of sorrow, and the land of ashes before we arrive at the land of I Can.
Mm-hmm.
We can skip any of those lands. Sometimes we have to go back through those lands multiple times, but once we know what the land of I Can looks like and feels like, and knows that the land of I Can lives inside of each and every one of us,
Yes.
then it's the powers in the knowing.
Mm.
So when September 11th happened, people were circulating the land of I Can around the land, like the sorrow, the land of ashes, as a book of empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about that time, so maybe 2003, where people were saying, look what you've done, can you help me?
Mm-hmm.
Now, interestingly, about the same time, I was co-author of the Idiot's Guide, which Timothy mentioned earlier. And it's because I used to fly up to Seattle to meet with Starbucks and Seattle's Best, because nobody knew who they were then.
Uh-huh.
But I was into coffee. And so I would come up here and look at what they were doing with their kiosks. And I fell madly in love with the Seattle area.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like my cafes were the end of a chapter in my life.
Uh-huh.
And my books and helping others was my future.
Mm-hmm.
So I moved. I live just outside Seattle now on 5 acres at the base of the Cascade Mountains.
Oh, nice.
And my office is in the barn, as you
Mm.
can see here. And I'm always here. I've got one big dog, Red, with me. I've got 3 little Yorkies at home. I've had horses and chickens. And so I am working. I've created a life for myself where I'm working in the element, in nature, that really resonates, even if I'm on a computer, even if I'm, you know, on a screen. And from that point, when I started doing that work virtually with clients, then there was another unfolding that happened where I realized that, yes, I could help a fiction author create a website, set up their social media, you know, create a strategic plan for them, do a launch for them. But the people that I really, really resonated, that I did my very best work with, were people who were already very successful and either wanted to take that existing success out in a really big way because they were in their 50s or 60s, or they were people, like I mentioned earlier, like they'd reached the top of a mountain but they changed and now they were looking for another mountain,
Yeah.
another way to be able to use that. And
Mhm.
that's when Messengers on a Mission was
Mhm.
formed.
Wow. So what does that, so tell us about that, how that works now, or what your, the kind of work that you're doing with people now.
Yeah. Thank you for asking that, because what I often talk about is book writing, and I do have coaching, both one-on-one and group for
Mhm.
that. The bigger picture for me is to tap into what I call the golden idea.
Mm.
And it's really not always evident because gold is not at the surface level, right?
Yeah.
You got to keep chipping away and chipping away and chipping away.
Yeah.
And as I work with someone and we get into really the heart and soul of what that person wants to do in the world
Mhm.
and how they want to help, who they want to help, who they want to serve,
Mhm.
then to me, it's the personal brand that
Mhm.
happens. And that personal brand, I'll give you an example in just a moment. To
Yeah.
me, I help them write a book because, you know, you're in the book world.
Hey, I
There's
love,
nothing that is a vehicle for a message like a book.
right.
So taking that brand and then writing a book to support that brand really is the foundational part. And in all honesty, if that gold has been found, and if the person is willing to show up and carry that message, there really isn't a whole lot else you need to do other than just keep doing it. You can't just do it, go
That's
through a book
true.
lunch and walk away.
Yeah. And that's true. Even if people don't read the book, the fact that you have it is almost like somebody's looking at your passport kind of thing. They're
Yes,
not really going to
yes,
examine it, but to know that you've got it and to know that that's your identity kind of thing,
yes,
the brand that you've wrapped
yes.
around that.
Yeah. Another quick little story that ties into what you were asking is that one of those clients who built a very successful real estate business in San Diego was able to retire, basically, has other people managing all his properties, but basically was able to retire in his early 50s.
Mhm.
And I had coached him when I still lived in San Diego on another topic, but he flew up here for a VIP weekend and we talked about what did he want to be doing. And he was a new time pilot. Now, he was one of the few people when I lived in San Diego and had learned to fly an airplane and had a Cessna 182. He was one of the few people that would fly with me to like Palm Springs or Big Bear Mountain, because most people are done. They don't want to get in a plane with a low time pilot, especially if it's a
Right.
girl. You know?
Right.
In any event, he flew up here and he had just started to fly. He had the time and the money, because you need both
Yeah.
to be able to fly. And he was flying, though, way further than I ever did. Most new pilots, private pilots, stay in their tri-state area. But
Right.
he was flying to the Caribbean and up to
Wow.
Alaska. And so the FBOs, the flight base operations that are available for private pilots at each airport, were asking him, like, would you come in and tell us about how you're doing that and why you're doing that? And I said, well, that's, you know, how do you, I can see the passion. I can see how inspired you are about this.
Mhm.
And if that's what you want to do, and you want to go out and speak, well, all speakers should be authors and all
Mhm.
authors should be speakers. So
Right.
let's create your brand. Let's write your first book, which we did. And his brand is called Flying Through Life. His first book is called Flying Through Life.
Mhm.
And we had a vision that we executed on based on passion and vision. And the destiny, which that's my formula, just in
Mhm.
case you want to know, risk plus vision equals destiny. If we
What's
get
the
to
first word?
destiny,
What was the first word? Risk?
risk
Risk
plus
plus
vision
vision.
equals destiny.
Okay, so risk is first. That's
Yes,
an
he had to be
interesting.
willing to take a risk.
Uh-huh.
I had to be willing to take a risk when I left small town Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
I had to be willing to risk leaving a corporate job that paid
Yeah.
very well to go open up a cafe chain that I knew nothing about how to do.
Yeah.
We have to be willing to take a risk, but it's not a risk like, oh, I think I'll walk off the end of this mountain and see if I survive it. There has to be a vision of what you see this risk unfolding into.
But it's
And
interesting. So the thing, yeah, so the risk, you're taking the risk and kind of like taking that step in that direction, even if you don't have the vision yet. Or do you have that, you have the vision
I
and
think it's the combination.
okay.
It's like when there's a formula, it's this plus this equals.
I got you.
So
Okay.
it's not one or the other.
Right. You're not going to
It's
take the
risk
risk.
plus vision
Yes.
equals destiny.
Got it. Yeah.
And what happened for this man
Yeah.
is just mind-boggling. It will take the whole rest of our time together, and I won't go into it here. But I will say that that book turned into a second book, which was Zen Pilot, about a circumnavigation that he did, set records in a solo Malibu Mirage, led to the last one that he did, which was Pole to Pole in a Twin Commander. And we're working on his third book, Peace Pilot. Within 2 to 3 years, I'd have to look back to get the exact time frame, he is considered a thought leader in the aviation community. He goes to Oshkosh, the biggest fly-in, and his plane is put on display. He was just at NBAA, which is the National Business Aircraft Association, with the Boeings and the Honeywells. His flights have been sponsored by Honeywell, MT Propeller, all the avionics companies. He has millions of dollars that has of sponsorship that have happened, but we could never have seen that back then when we created Flying Through Life. Right. We just knew that if we got that gold right, if we were able to tap into an idea that had legs, that was something he was willing to go out and tell people about, not just stay home in his jammies and say, oh, well, this was a cool idea. Now what am I going to do with it? He was willing to go out and be the messenger. Right. And it just continues to unfold. Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, and I guess one of those things is when you start taking that action, right, that it's going to then open up all the next things. It all that's the best strategy. That is the absolute best strategy, because everything else is a tactic in my mind. Have you heard Dan Sullivan's concept about the 4 C's? About absolutely, yes. Yeah, and that I'll just say quickly because people think it's scary to take a risk, but Dan said that he learned in the military, in boot camp, that his commanding officer, they were at doing a training with live grenades, and they asked, is anybody afraid? And Dan raised his hand and said, I'm afraid. And nobody else did. And the officer said, well, Dan's the only one who's telling the truth. And it's okay to be afraid. There's a difference between fear and courage. Fear is peeing your pants, and courage is doing what you need to do with wet pants. Absolutely. I love that. I mean, look at, you see my lion behind me here? You can be a cowardly lion or you can be a courageous lion. Right. And anytime we move outside our comfort zone, like the grenade, we're going to feel fear. Right. And we need to call on the courage. Yes. So how do you start with somebody? What does it take to reinvent yourself as a visionary? How many people are? Because I bet if we just were silent for a second, that if you just asked yourself the message that that's been trying to come through you, I wonder if people have a sense of that there's a message that they've been getting the call, but not really taking it seriously, or wondering if that's the call, or what's your experience? I think it's all of the above, Dean. I think sometimes it's like the seed we were born with. The seed in our heart. Yeah. And so not everybody is a messenger. Not everybody is called for that. But if you've got that feeling, sometimes you're spot on. And I'll tell you about a story about another client. You're spot on to what that is. And other times, like the client I just told you about, he didn't know. He didn't know. And I like to call myself a guide rather than a coach. It's like if you're gonna climb Mount Everest, you need somebody who's done that before. You need a guide along the way. So I consider myself a guide as we go up the mountain and we look for that gold. I don't think it's always super evident, but I'll give you an example and then answer the question that you asked me, how do I do it? There's a man who's very well known in the direct response marketing. You might know who he is, Dean Rick Cesari.
Of course.
Yeah, he did the very first big infomercial with the George Foreman grill. But his background prior to that, where Sultan brought him in to take a look at this product and see, because he completely reinvented what that grill was and brought in the name and in a big marketing. But his company prior to that was a juicer. This is back, I don't know when, 80s, like before juicing was what it is today. And he sold that company and then went off to do these other things. And he was marketing Sonic Care toothbrushes when nobody had an electric toothbrush, and you could spend $100 for the Sonic Care, or you could buy a regular toothbrush for $10.
Right.
But his work had always been behind the camera. And people knew him from behind the camera, but he came to a point in his life a few years ago, and he happens to live here in Seattle, and he found me on LinkedIn, and he said, I have a book that's coming out and I need somebody to help market. Would you be willing to get together for a cup of coffee? And it was the oddest thing, Dean, because I don't get together for coffee with people. I do all my work virtually. And I looked at who he was, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to meet Rick Cesari. So I met he and his wife for coffee, and immediately we hit it off, and they came out and we did a VIP day for his book that had been done, $1 Billion Brands. And it didn't take off because it really had no soul. It was done with another author, and it has all this stuff in it. But when you read it, it's pretty flat. And so he and his wife, Martha, and I we become friends. We got together for dinner one night, and he said, Susan, I want to keep working with you. What can we do? And I said, I really want to find out what your personal brand is and not everybody else's brand. And then I want you to write a book about that. So that's what we did. And he was seeing himself, I'm not talking out of turn, he says this on podcasts all the time. He was feeling out of his element because this whole digital marketing thing, he didn't quite get it. That's not what his work had been. And the infomercial world was not what it had been in the past. And now everybody's doing video online. And, that wasn't necessarily what his forte was, but we dove in and we found it's still video. It's just video using his same persuasive tactics that he used in infomercials, and now helping Amazon brands and people who need the same thing, but they need it in a different way. And so he wrote his book, Video Persuasion. So that was taking somebody who had the interest, but again, it wasn't that he knew what it was, though. He knew what his background was, but he didn't know how to reinvent that to bring it forward into what we now consult, and it's certainly not like he doesn't help people do video marketing as in teaching people how to create videos like we're doing today. He works with brands still, but helping those brands create the kind of videos online that were really only available on television in years gone by.
I mean, it's a great message to hang your video persuasion is actually something that is like a practical outcome too.
It is, and he loves Robert Cialdini. And so he studies him, and so he understands, because his type of video infomercial was very much persuasion oriented with direct marketing. And so it's the perfect name for the book. It's helped take him into just some really wonderful areas. And here's a fun thing, is that he has wanted to write a book a year. And he wrote a book last year with another man around the Amazon space and marketing called Amazon Jungle. And so this year was rolling around, and he said, I want to write another book this year, Susan. I said, okay. And I said, just let me know when. And then I was forming up this group coaching plan. I said, Rick, you've already done one-on-one work with me. You know how I work. If you need the accountability and the support that comes with coaching, do you want to come into the group coaching? And he did. So we're finishing up I can't tell you the name because we're not absolutely sure of it yet, but it is taking the video persuasion tactics and tools and putting it into the health arena, because that again almost goes full circle. And so many of the brands that he helps are supplements or in the health space.
Right.
And his first product was in the health space. And that's like a really important, passionate topic for him.
Yeah.
So we're marrying the two for his next book.
Wow. So what would you call that video persuasion was his golden idea? Is that the...
Yes. And the golden idea, again, it was different in that he had it. He had the knowledge, but we needed to bring it out in a way that was current in 2019 when his book came out. With Robert, the prior example, it was entirely different. His book has nothing to do with how to buy and rehab single dwelling homes or duplexes or fourplexes or buy apartment buildings. It really has nothing to do with that.
Right.
But the determination, the persistence that Robert had in building that business carried over into Flying Through Life.
How do you help take people through some exercise to find that, or to mine for that, I guess?
Yes.
Yeah.
If they don't already know what that is, like, oh, I'm passionate about health and I want to write a book.
What percentage of people come to you that they're seeking you out because they've gotten the call?
Yes.
And they know what that is, or versus people who I buy into this, but I don't know that I've gotten the call, or how can I know if I got the call?
Yeah. Well, I work with both people. Sometimes they come to me with an idea, and then the mining is what makes it unique, what makes you different. And we know what the message is. We know who the audience is that you want to reach, but how do we bring more of you as an individual into this? For other people, they don't know. They just know that they were put on this earth to do more than what they've been doing. And they want to make a difference. They want to make a difference. They want to create a legacy. In both cases, to get to the real you, who we are, because the land of I Can, I mean, you heard my story. This is in my DNA, the land of I Can. So we want to get into the DNA of the person. And it's always, what are you passionate about? I'm passionate about animals. I'm passionate about walking in the woods. I'm passionate about pushing my own barriers, and trying to, okay, if I run a 10K, can I run a half marathon? Okay, if I do a half marathon, can I do a marathon? Can I walk the Camino de Santiago that's 500 miles across the country of Spain? Tick that box. Yep, did it.
Wow.
So, and when you go off, it's kind of like that risk plus vision equals destiny, Dean. I trained for it. I started walking longer and longer distances before I went to Spain. I put on a backpack and kept adding more and more weight till it got to the weight of the backpack that I would be carrying for 5 weeks. And when I got on that plane, I had everything taken care of. I had somebody to come and house sit for my dogs, my chickens, my horses. I had my admin people in place. I finished up everything with my coaching clients. So I had a 5-week window there. But I knew going over, something could happen. I knew that I could have a knee that would go out, or, an Achilles heel that would get pulled. So we don't know what the future is. We just know that we have to go into it with what the vision is that we have for it, that we've prepared for it, and we're going to take that risk to see if it turns out to be our destiny. And when I'm working with someone, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for something, it's like crystal. When you tap a crystal with a spoon or a knife and you hear that ching, it just has that crystal ring. It's not watered down. It's not a clunk. It's not a thump. We just keep mining.
Jerry Spence, I heard great words about that. Jerry Spence calls that the thin clank of the counterfeit. That we can detect the thin clank of the counterfeit. But that, you're right, when you hit the crystal, it's just a beautiful, resonant, soulful ringing. Yeah.
Because we all have a frequency. We're
Yeah.
all vibrating at frequencies, whether it's low, medium, or high. And we're tapping into the frequency of that person to be able to see what is that message and how can we help the world with it.
So I'm getting the feeling that the destiny isn't something that you've already determined and you're trying to get to it. The destiny is the reward for the journey of doing
it's the unfolding.
the risk and the
it's
risk
the unfolding.
and the vision
Yes.
executed leads
Yes.
you to what your destiny is. Yeah.
Yeah. And just like the two examples of clients, and I could go on and on,
Mhm.
with different people, but those are two great examples because they've both gone through the process. They both are doing their work in the world, but they came
Yeah.
at it from different spaces.
Yeah.
But I wrote a parable, which if anybody wants to download the parable, just go to messengersonamission.com. And the parable, when you start reading it, you're going to think it's a children's story. It's
Mhm.
not a children's story. Although we know in children's stories, things happen in pairs of three. So there is something that happens within this parable
Mhm.
that isn't in threes. But
Mhm.
at the very end of it, there is an unfolding. There's a change that happens for the main character in the parable. And that change is what I live for, Dean. There's a transformation that happens
Yeah.
with the person when I first start to work with them versus who they are when the book comes out
Mm.
because of that process.
I wonder how many people feel like that. I'd love to see just in the comments here, maybe, if you feel like you are getting a calling or that you've had a calling, that you feel like there's something that you're being called for. Just a quick, yes, 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 yep. I think that's an interesting, yeah. I think there's something like if people are quiet with themselves, we all feel that it's there, yes, to make learning fun.
Yes.
Yeah, these are yeah, it's
And you're
encouraging.
right. Where I do it, like when I was walking on the Camino and I did it by myself, I didn't do it with a group of people. When I'm walking in the woods, I actually wrote a children's book for one of my clients while I was walking because the ideas would just drop in. You know how it is when you're taking a shower. You get
Right.
great ideas in the shower.
Yes.
When we're quiet and we are tapped in to our inner knowing, that's where the genius code is.
Do you know what's so sad now is how difficult it is to find those moments, because we are overtaken with our phones. I think about that. I've been thinking about that a lot since 2007, when the iPhone came out and we have the internet with us at all times. This migration to Cloudlandia comes with it, that's our passport to Cloudlandia. We are existing in this Cloudlandia through the portal of our iPhone. And it's so difficult to put that down and draw ourselves away from it.
Yes.
We don't have any moments of silence. We're filling those moments with TikTok and with things that are, no matter what, if you've got 5 minutes for something, it's filled with, there's never an opportunity to be bored. There's never an opportunity where your attention
but isn't
is
that
not 100% engaged outward?
just like BJ Fogg from
Yeah.
Genius and Forming Good Habits? I think it is within us to set boundaries.
Yeah.
It is within us to say, for the next hour, I'm not going to pick up this phone.
Yes.
For the next hour, I'm
I
going to
dare
go
you to
take
try
a hot
that.
shower.
How many people have tried that even today and said to themselves, I'm just going to put it down for an hour? I'm honestly saying to myself, I'm hyper vigilant when things like this are going. I know the value of being quiet and being still. And I routinely block off 50-minute blocks where I am away from the phone. But if I ever thought of having a day or a morning without my phone, it almost like there's a voice inside of you. If I say I'm going to go to the cafe or I'm going to go out for a drive, my mind is saying, well, you should probably take your phone just in case, you need it or something happened. It's like for your personal safety, you'd want to. There's never a moment where we are off the grid,
Is it,
Yeah.
do you feel, and I'm speaking for myself as I'm hearing you talk,
Yeah.
is it kind of like a fear of missing out, like fear of missing a
I
phone
think
call?
I don't really care that I miss out. It's that I think that cellularly that's the way
Okay.
we're just compulsively drawn to it, that these
Yeah.
notifications, you
Yeah.
hear anything, we're so used to having a thought. I have a courtyard right outside here in my house, and when I go out there, what I do is I leave my phone in the house
Okay, that's
by the
good.
front door, so I can go out there. I've got a separate timer out there, so I don't need to know, but I've made the decision that I'm going for 50 minutes to think, to journal to. It's the only way I
Yes.
can get things done. But if I get 2 or 3 of those blocks during a day, that is a gold star day. Otherwise, it's very we're very like constantly drawn.
But keep exercising that muscle, Dean.
Yes, that's
Keep
exactly it.
exercising. I would think about Elko.
Yeah,
I know he has a separate place where he goes to work and then
yeah,
he comes home to his family. And I
yeah,
need that. That's why I come to work at the
yeah,
barn
yeah,
and then I go home.
yeah,
I'm certainly plugged in, but I have my boundaries. Like I don't take a call past 6 o'clock in the evening.
yeah,
I don't, with few exceptions, don't take a call even if I'm working with someone in Europe before 6 a.m.
right.
There are certain things that are just because otherwise there isn't time for the things like walks
Yeah.
and playing with the puppy dogs and things that aren't phone oriented. Then I'm leaving out those things and the phone is taking over.
Well, this is yeah, Gina just put up, I did a video called the 50-minute focus finder. And it's the
Okay.
process of how to do this. I can't believe how fast time is flying here with us, Susan. But what would be, if you were to say like today, if we were to go now in a final stretch here, a little thing of what would be the message that you most want to get across today for people?
Thank you for asking that, Dean. You can probably almost guess what it's going to be.
Okay.
But my final message would be, if you feel a calling, if you feel you have something to share with the world, do it. Leave it as your legacy, because I learned very early on, as I told in my story, my husband died at 28 and my mother was 51. When I reached the age of 28 and realized that's how old my husband was when he passed away, when I reached the age of 51 and I realized, wow, my mom was really young. I mean, we don't have finite time on the planet. I could get in the car and go up to pick up groceries and, be hit by a car this afternoon. We don't know what's in our future. So what do we want to leave? What message is inside of us
Yeah.
that we want to share with the world?
Yeah.
What do you want to be remembered for?
I think that's great. So many times people have such great stories or great message to get out, but nobody kind of pushes them. They just need that little bit of
It's more than
encouragement.
it's setting an intention, but then it's acting, as you said earlier, Dean. We have to act on that intention.
I love finding the golden thread and finding what you've the process of diving down into them. What other questions do you have that you ask them when you are trying to really fine tune their genius code?
Everybody asks me that, Gina. And I have to tell you, that's why I call myself an intuitive visionary. And I see here people are asking if I have a course. I don't have a course, but I do have a group coaching program. And I coined it, as you have I Love Marketing, I have ilovegoldenIdeas.com. If you go to ilovegoldenIdeas, because I do.com, But it's very intuitive for me, Gina. You know, what I would work with you and the questions I would ask you, and then the answers you would give me, I would be keen off that information. It would be different if I were asking those questions with Dean and keen off his answers. And just like the Land If I Can kind of dropped in, I kind of get these drop-ins. And in fact, there's a video that's on the homepage of susangilbert.com that was filmed by a documentary team who was following my client, Robert De Laurentiis, around the world. And we're still working on getting that docuseries out. But my client said, he goes, I want to do a testimonial for you. Well, that testimonial turned out to be like a 10-minute video.
Wow.
But one of the things he says is, my intuition is so incredible. And it is, I mean, it's God-given, you know, it's nothing it's not like you can read a book and learn how to do it, I don't think. But it's that combination of working with somebody and being in that moment with them that gets down to the golden idea. And it's why I never created a course, because quite frankly, I don't know how to do this without working with people.
Do you have them do an ebook or a paperback or a hardcover?
When I'm working with someone, it always comes down to who are they trying to reach and what's the best medium for them. But the most common thing is to do a Kindle and a paperback.
Mhm.
And then my book is a hardback. If it's a legacy piece, then a hardback. It could be that it's more of a lead magnet, Dean. It could be that they just want to get that message out to their audience.
You're singing my song now.
Yeah, I know. You know, sometimes it's a lead magnet, but the most common through the process is a Kindle and paperback.
Part of the thing, you know, even when if you're going to, you know, deliver a message, you're going to do that. Hopefully that what you're doing is you're building a community of people that resonate with this message. You're just the, you know,
Messenger. You're the messenger.
You're the messenger of it. Right, exactly. That when the message is received, so much, that's why I'm such a fan of, you know, self-appointment is really the biggest thing that I think people have to overcome, is this idea that there's no grand committee waiting to appoint you to the position of messenger. It's a self-appointed role with a lifetime term. There's no term limits. There's no limits on the number of people you can deliver your message to. You're 100% able to do it at your as big as you can do it. But the idea that it's a living thing too. If you're a messenger, you've got to be open that the message is going to evolve and the message is going to take on a life of its own as other people get touched by it and inspired by it and are a factor of it. That, you know, so that's why I would start with just the beginning, you know.
Yes.
I see Gina, someone's asking how short can a book be? You know, they said, I just got Matt Basak's new book, 56 pages. Well, that's really, you know, there's no limit. There's nothing. A book is gathering of information.
The limit, I would say, in these days, is don't write a 500-page book. Turn that into 3 books.
I think that's absolutely true.
Yeah, you know, the pilot's name is Robert De Laurentiis. And here's a funny thing. I had someone from Genius Network who contacted me. We jumped on a call to talk about his potential book. And lo and behold, that Genius Network member was up in Alaska when my client, Robert De Laurentiis, was coming back around and was headed back to San Diego. They met in a coffee shop. And he has a copy of his book. I mean, what are the chances?
Wow, that's awesome.
That would happen.
I have somewhere in my thing here, it's out of my reach, but you know, I use as an example the book Common Sense by Thomas Paine, which was the book that basically laid the whole foundation for the founding fathers when we did when we were building America, is 88 pages.
There you go.
And on the other end of that, the Communist Manifesto is 36 pages. And you look at two little books that did big ideas.
Yeah.
And surely your idea is somewhere on a spectrum between Common Sense and the Communist Manifesto. So if you can bookend those big revolution starters with,
Yes. And thank you for
whatever your
dropping,
message.
Gina, you dropped Joe's in there.
Yeah.
The trend that I have seen, and when I'm working with people in the 90-day accelerator, so I think somebody said, how long is the coaching? It's 90 days. But the time frame that we work is to get a draft done and then work with an editor to whatever degree is needed.
Yeah.
But the trend right now is to do a book that's maybe 125 pages.
Yeah.
5 to 7 chapters.
Yeah.
Where, as you were mentioning earlier, Dean, with using the phone and being connected to the phone, and we're time constrained in these days, and we don't want to have to wade through several hundred pages to get the message.
Right.
We want to do it in a shorter standpoint, and then the person can write another book, and then the person can write another book.
Yes. Yeah. I love this idea of leading it into a podcast too, where you can start the idea. I did a book for our real estate community called The Listing Agent Lifestyle. And so you get everybody gathered around this idea of being a listing agent and having a nice lifestyle without, constantly working.
Feast or famine.
Yeah, exactly. And that as a short book says you're in the right place, but then it's a podcast, a new podcast every week that explores all of the big things. So I look at the book as just here's what we're talking about, and here's the big picture of this. And then join us. We're evolving this every week, and the community keeps building and building and building. And that's where, there's no rules anymore. It's not, we're definitely not carving them in stone, right? With tablets, you can have a one-of-one book now.
Yes. It's really, it's to whatever degree, when we go back to the message again, to whatever degree do you need to get that message out there? Is it complete with one book and you're done and you're on your way? Or in the case of with Robert, my pilot client, one book led to another, has led to another. And I can tell you, Peace Pilot, even though it hasn't even been published yet, will not be his last book.
Right. Exactly.
So because he continues to evolve as a person in the world with this message.
I got a direct message on a question about the emotionally compelling aspect of your brand, your marketing for your message and your branding for your book is going to change depending on who you got to talk to, right? Should it go into a podcast? Should it go, where are you going to put it and all of that? So and that's probably something you cover when you're working one-on-one with them. But how do you just say, what is my emotionally compelling prospect, that golden thread that's going to just be the emotional compelling part? For example, Dean had Stop Your Divorce, and just that title was emotionally compelling. That's what people wanted to do. And Dean, I think if I'm correct, that was the book where you very first started the very first online squeeze page, or the first.
That's right. It all led, who knew where it would lead, right? Is so many things that came out of that, because the next step out of that was then I created a course called How to Write, Publish, and Sell a Money-Making Ebook, where that started then Eben Pagan and Marie Forleo. And I mean, all these things that came out of that, every step that you take, everything you're doing is opening up new opportunities that you wouldn't have if you hadn't jumped off, right? Taking the risk to jump off.
Yeah. And Gina, to answer the question that you were sent in the DM, Dean will know this, you know this, Gina, anybody on here who has done any copywriting, we all know we have to know our avatar. And when we know who we're speaking to, we know what can be emotionally compelling.
Mhm.
So it's, who do you serve? Who is it that you want to reach? What do they need? The answer will come from that. One of my clients, we just started to work together a few months ago, but it has taken, we only came up with this a couple of weeks ago. So it's taken a few months of doing that, looking at her avatar. What's her stake in the ground? What does she want to stand for? What does she want to be known for? She's somebody who has come from, I don't know, I'm going to take a guess, she's in her 50s, which again is kind of an interesting thing, because that's kind of like the age 50s, 60s, 70s is when people come to me. But she had a lot of trauma. She came from an alcoholic mother, alcoholic father, physical abuse, because that felt normal. That's what she married, so all of these things, all this trauma work that she began 20 years ago to work on herself. And as she began to work on herself, she didn't realize that what she was doing for herself wasn't what everybody did for themselves. And so she can actually go in, kind of like a Carolyn Mace does the medical intuitive work. She can go inside somebody and see where the trauma is, either from this lifetime, often it's from a child, but not always, could be an ancestor, could be past life. And we just, all of a sudden it hit us, even though we're doing all this stuff around trauma. And, there's trauma is a big word right now. So we know that there's a big market for that. So that's kind of like the emotional piece of this. But what we realized is she is a trauma intuitive. So we went over to Google on a coaching call and said, please let trauma intuitive be available. And it was traumaintuitive.com. So even though we're still working on and naming the book, it is that mining process to get down to what is the work that you really do and who are you really helping, and what will be emotionally compelling to that avatar, to that person who you were trying to reach. So Gina, it's going to be different for everybody.
I had a really great, like a way to get this kind of feeling when you're writing, or when you're, however you're doing, when you're outlining, doing that. A great way to start is when you get a chapter, you're going to start a chapter, to at the top of the page, really picture a real person that this avatar is, have a name for them, and start out the chapter, Dear Susan, and then write like you were writing it, to explain it the best that you can to Susan, and then finish the chapter and cut off the Dear Susan part.
Yeah.
And it reads
I
like
couldn't
you've written
agree
it for one.
more.
Yeah.
So many people, I will say, write the book you wish you would have had 20 years ago.
Yeah.
What book did you want to read to help you through what you have learned? And that's exactly what you just said, Dean.
Yeah.
I did get another question of the intuitive trauma healer. I mean, I think you said Carolyn Mace is the MD. What's the name of the coach?
It's Veronica Paris. Veronica Paris is the woman's name. And if you type traumaintuitive.com into your browser, it forwards to her website.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, writing it as a chapter, a letter to yourself, that's amazing. And the book you would want to have read 20 years ago or 40 years ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
Susan, what would be your call to action for people here? What should we?
I think the call to action, Gina, I think you have dropped in what my book accelerator link is, but the call to action is go to Messengers on a Mission and download the parable. You're going to get a real sense of what that imaginary, because it's an imaginary, a parable is a story with a lesson we learn through stories. And the parable is the way Jesus did his work in the world, was with parables. So it'll give you a taste of what that looks like. And it also at the end has how you can reach me.
I love that. Well, this has been delightful. I mean, it's such a great time to, it went very fast. I know that we really scratched the surface, and I'm happy that I got to really visit with you here and get to spend.
Likewise, Dean, this has been a real joy. I mean, anytime we can do what we know we do well. And
Yeah.
you've done, as Timothy was saying earlier, you've done such a great job with the I Love Marketing. I've been on almost every episode that you have
that's
hosted,
great.
and you do such a great job. And I really appreciate how you supported me and asked me some really great questions, as well as the questions that have come in from the audience.
Susan, thank you again. This was great. Gina, you're
Thank you.
amazing. Everybody,
everybody.
Sea to Shining Sea, thank you for joining us here in Cloudlandia, and we will be back next time. Have a great day.